Nigeria's headline inflation rate has eased further in November, considering a multi-month moderation in price pressures after a period of sharply rising costs. While the headline figures offer some relief for policymakers and consumers alike, deeper questions remain about everyday price experiences, the sustainability of this trend, and the real economic impact on households and businesses. As Nigeria seeks stable prices alongside growth, understanding what this moderation means and doesn't mean is critical to shaping future economic strategy. We have Muktar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Muktar, joining us now for the conversation. Great to have you in, sir.
Compliment of the season.
Same to you. And I think let's focus on, well, is it something to celebrate? This inflation data sliding significantly. I think the question many are asking, of what use is the data point, right, if it doesn't inform key decision-making or lived experience?
Well, I think what we are saying is what I call government magic in terms of, and there's song by the late Afrobeat legend Fela Kuti that said this is government magic. If you look at it year on, you see that inflation has come down. And the reason why that is happening is because of the rebasing of the Nigeria economy. And so that has helped bring down those inflationary figures. But if you look at month to month, inflation is still high. And when you look deeply into the month to month, you realize food inflation, food and beverages inflation is high, transportation is high, energy is high, housing, education, health. When you look at all these places, these things I've mentioned, realize that these are largely what affect the generality of the Nigerians in the bottom. So definitely, when you do the measurement-based inflation, it seems like inflation is doing well. But when you come to market reality, it seems to not correlate with what you are saying. I know the government is celebrating it, but they should look at it critically and realize that month to month is still high. And if you look at rural inflation, which used to be one of the lowest, it's high. And that tells you that the farmers are not able to go to farm, or the rural area are becoming more poor. There's more poverty in the rural area than in the urban area, because if inflation is about 15-point-something% in the rural area, then you know what you are dealing with in terms of the poverty level of the Nigerians in the rural area. And so there's a lot that still needs to be done. Fuel and other gas contributors also spike inflation month to month. So definitely, I think in as much as the government is celebrating their beating expectation, they should look at month to month and begin to think of what they can do so that what they are saying year to year can be translated into month to month and then can have impact on the ordinary Nigerian.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it's important what you highlighted there, that I think the focus from what you're saying should be on the month-on-month figures than, you know, the bold one that's being minted, which is the 14.45% for November. And let's focus on the CBN now and interest rates. We know that there hasn't been much of a reaction to these numbers from the CBN. Maybe that's they're also looking at the month-on-month. Beginning of the year, we had inflation at 24.48%. Now November, 14.45%. Interest rates, February, the decision was 27.5%. November, we're still at 27%. So, I mean, what would you say is going through the mind of the decision makers when it comes to interest rates when they see inflation for November at 14.45%?
What we're going through their mind is to keep holding, just keep holding, because again, it's a very, very dicey, what I call risky landscape that we are inflation-wise, because when you look at those, like I said, year to year, it seems to be doing better. Month to month, it's still those challenges. And you and I know why we year to year is doing better. It's because of the rebusiness. So CBN will be looking at all this. Don't forget that 2026 is an election year also. The CBN also will be looking at that, because that in the election Nigeria means a lot of movement of liquidity. Don't forget we are entering 2026, that is going to be a tax year also. So CBN will be looking at it. The capital gain tax, will it still bring investors into Nigeria that they have used to stabilize the exchange rate, or will see those volatility come back? They also will be looking at that. They will also be looking at the key drivers of inflation. How much have we done that will reduce this inflationary pressure in this key driver, especially if you look at housing, look at transportation. Today now transportation should be coming down because of the fuel price from Aligo Dangote to about 734 naira. But you know that will only point down to those that own car like you. And so your cost of consumption will come down. But to the public, they will still be also dealing with high transportation costs in this festivity period, and then if you are moving out of Lagos also, that means you'll be paying more, and that is largely driven by the demand. Demand is high, supply is low. Also, airfare also has gone up. Even despite all this, what we are seeing, that they don't buy Jet A4 outside the shop is going, but cost of airfare has gone up. They attributed it to 18 different taxes that they pay as an airline. So when you look at all this, you know that the CBN will also look at this and decide that, you know what, if we are really going to look at reality on ground, this is what we should do. We should be holding it. But if we want to look at political side of it, then we should be cutting rate. And at the long run, it will definitely catch up with us, because the reality in terms of economy normally come to your face. Like my friend Paul Alaje would say, he said, if you commit spiritual sin, you can be forgiven. You go to God, you pray to God, and God will forgive you. But when you commit economical sin, you must pay the price for it. And that price sometimes could be very, very huge. So we need to be careful.
And very briefly, I think it has to be history in the making somewhat across the globe, where you see inflation falling at record speed, but interest rates are not, budging at all. But I think, like you said, it has a lot to do with our local context. And I think, would you say that that's the best way to go about it? Rather than the textbook approach, we should go about it looking at what is happening in our immediate environment.
Well, like I said, it's cut and paste. Remember, I used to say cut and paste, and everybody felt that you're being too hard on the CBN. Why are you saying they are cut and paste? But now look at it now. Is it not cut and paste? Globally, we are cutting rate. Globally, we are cutting rate. Globally, they were hiking rate. Globally, we are hiking rate. Globally, inflation was coming down. Globally, inflation was going high. Globally, for us to meet up, we have to do rebasing. So definitely the reality is different. And so the CBN is really actually going to be looking at it. Look, ordinarily, when you cut rate, the first place to respond is the stock market. They will respond positively to a cut rate. But as it stands today, the stock market is not even responding to a cut rate. So you see that maybe already pricing this cut some time ago, whereby we saw those big market movements. So it doesn't add up, because a rate cut also will galvanize your economy. Joanna, don't forget, it's not only rate cut that we are dealing with. We are dealing with consumer index perception, which it seems to have improved, and yet consumption and cost is still high. So the reality on ground does not tally what the numbers and the figures are telling us. So we need to really work on that.
Yes, and I think we'll get into the human side of this inflation data after this break. Stay with us, Mr. Muktar. Nigeria's inflation falls below budget estimate for the first time in 6 years. That's one of many headlines making the rounds, as November's inflation hit 14.45%. Someone called it or said MPR is economic, inflation is political. But of course, we have joining us, and he has shared quite some insight as to why this is the situation, Muktar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Muktar. Thank you for staying with us. And before the break, you were highlighting the fact that consumption, in spite of steadying prices, I can't say reduced prices because that's not what the inflation numbers necessarily suggest, we are seeing consumption still low. And that draws me to the question, how is all this affecting the local economy and the everyday Nigerian?
Remember, the everyday Nigerian is a daily Nigerian. What would I call it? Daily earns income daily. So, and the way he earns its income daily is through consumption. He sells goods on the rail, the market woman. The daily Nigerian is the informal sector. The everyday Nigerian play the informal sector. And now this sector is the largest employer of labor in Nigeria. So, and once consumption is not high, this sector bleeds, because that means they are not able to make a lot of money to even stay afloat. So when you look at that, with what the numbers are saying, with what affect the day-to-day life of Nigeria, you could begin to see that this is the more reason why this number seems not to tally with reality on ground. Then secondly, you need to look at the key drivers of inflation. And when you look at what I've said, if you look at food, you look at accommodation, you look at restaurants, you look at transportation, you look at health, you look at non-alcoholic beverages, all these are largely local, or what I call the informal sector type of luxury. And so they are struggling. And you can see the inflationary figure in that space is high. So that tells you why the average Nigerian is still struggling to time the reality with what the government is telling them. So, and if you are staying in a place like Lagos, accommodation is not going to go down anytime soon. So that is the challenge. Is like you rightly pointed out, what we have seen thus far is that prices are stable. The steady price. You don't have those hyper price that you have. You go in the morning or you come back in the afternoon, is higher than, but prices are relatively stabilized. But instability also, there comes the challenge of able to even buy into this stability, because the earning of the average Nigerian, whether in public or civil servant, is not commensurate to the challenges they face when they go to purchase this item.
I can imagine the reality a lot of us, myself included, and I'm sure yourself, are facing. Let's look at how this impacts businesses. For businesses, does a lower inflation rate, does it help with planning and investments? Are there uncertainties like exchange rates? Is that behind us? And input costs?
We are in the festivity period. Exchange rates is supposed to stabilize this year because we enjoy a lot of inflow from Nigerians in the diaspora that comes in during December. But you can realize, but what we have seen now thus far is that exchange has sparked up. We are even struggling to close the year at 1,500. Before now, we're thinking we'll close the year at 1,300. So definitely there's a challenge. And once FX rate is affected, then you begin to see the key drivers of inflation. So that is there. Then you also have the demand side, like you have pointed out. Then you have the sectors that are really struggling. Again, and these sectors are sectors that are largely the bottom low sector of the Nigerian economy. So those are the challenges that we will definitely be dealing with. And festivity period has come with its own demand. The demands are high, but the supplies are low. So definitely price will spike. So it is the way it is because that is how it has always been. Because we have not done anything differently. The only thing we have done differently now is to liberalize the FX market. Every other thing is same of same. the CMG buses are not there to reduce cost of transportation. CMB buses are not there. CMB trucks are not there to move product from the farmland to the rural from the rural area to the urban area, so that would drive down the cost of production and then drive down the cost of sale for consumers. We are not seeing that. So until there's a correlation in terms of what we are trying to do with the reality on ground, we'll continue to have a political MBS numbers.
Political. And to tie things together, you talk about doing things differently. What needs to be done differently? Specifically, you highlighted one or two things, but in summary, what needs to be done differently so we can see that marriage between the numbers and the lived reality?
We need to improve security so that farmers will go to farm. Once we do that, we are able to meet local demand. Definitely price will go down. We also need to attract foreign direct or portfolio investors so that we can have a steady reserve. And to do that, we have to rethink our model of taxation, especially the capital gain tax. We need to look at that. And then we also need to look at empowering our people. Because what you see in the government cycle is they talk about economic prosperity without the empowerment of the people. So what happens when that prosperity comes is not the locals that would normally have enjoyed it, is the foreign direct investors or foreign portfolio investors. So we need to do that.
Thank you very much for your recommendations and perspective on the show today. Muktar Mohammed, CEO of Finance with Muktar.